What's up, everybody? How's it going? Austin Practical, Practical Elevate Performance, coming at you live. It's Thursday. It's check-in day. It was an amazing day today. I'm excited to share all my wins with you guys later. All my clients' wins, which win in my book. Um, Today, meh, if you didn't notice, mustacheless. Um, Going live. The topic for today. I had a client of mine reach out and asked me to do a live on, they personally were going through, kind of a low point, kind of going through depression, kind of going through, a lack of motivation. And they were asking me, like, what do you do? Like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you, like, get through that whenever that's, like, happening to you, when that's going on? Like, what do you do to, like, still get your workouts in and still like be on top of your nutrition and things like that. And so um I want to talk a little bit about that, like talk a little bit about like my process behind it and how I deal with it when it happens. Because I you know have I don't know exactly what level of depression I have, but I do suffer from it from time to time. As of lately, not so much, thankfully, but it does happen. And when it does happen, it fucking sucks. And so, it's one of those things where I am, a huge mental health advocate. You kind of have to be whenever you're, just being a decent person, anyways. You should be. And also when it comes to what I'm doing, I have to be on top of my own shit when it comes to my own mental health, because how can I expect, to be a good like leader and a good coach and a good like mentor if I don't have my own shit together? And sometimes, like, let's be honest, like sometimes, like even when it like even when I do like I don't know, even when everything's going right and everything's going well and I'm doing everything within my power to be on top of that stuff. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes it's one of those things where you just have to take the L and live to see it, live to fight another day, kind of thing. And so, um, for me, anyways, though, it's like how I handle like depression and like motivation and like when it comes to like my fitness journey and things like that. It's like my mentality behind that is something is better than nothing. Like you may not feel like going and doing like a full super intense workout or going for like a big long run or doing everything perfectly, because your brain is like being chemically thrown off, or the chemical balance is being thrown off and you don't have any control over it. And it's one of those things where, like, for me personally, like when it happens to me, and not to get into too much detail, but like I can feel it kind of coming on, and I feel kind of like a physical difference in my head whenever it's coming on for me, when I'm starting gonna have like a depressive episode. And so for me, like, at least I'm lucky enough where I can kind of tell when it's going to start to happen. And so I can start to kind of start like take some precautions and things like that. But for me, like sometimes when it happens to me, like no shit, like I can barely do anything. Like I can like barely get myself out of bed. Like I can barely like help to take care of my kids sometimes. Like it's that bad that I feel like totally helpless. Like, and I'm like, and the other thing too is like, for me personally, I know I bet a lot of you guys, deal with this too, is like, you know, I know what I should be doing, but because of what's going on up in here, I can't do it. Like, I cannot, like, a lot of times, sometimes I cannot, no matter what I do, I cannot will myself to do it, even though, I know I should be. And this is the thing that a lot of people do, and this is what I used to do, and I still do sometimes, but I'm getting a lot better at it, is, you beat yourself up for it. Like, you're like, what you should be doing, and so you make yourself feel bad, and you, like, basically, like, internally talk shit to yourself to the point where you make yourself feel even worse, which is not good. It's like you feel bad and you can't help it, and then you make yourself feel even more bad because you're like incapable of doing certain things that you should be doing, and then it's like and then you feel even worse, and then it's just this really bad like loop, this big bad cycle of negative thought and feeling and all that stuff. And so it's really easy to like let that throw you off completely. And so, for me, when that happens, I like to, you know, you know, um, even though like when things like that happen to me, like having my like system, like practicing my like discipline and practicing like my like that I've talked about in the past, like my daily do or deadlifts, like doing that all the time, like every single day, making sure that I do it every day gets me and my brain and my body in the habit, even whenever I have shit going on up in here that isn't like, conducive to my success. Like it's almost like breathing, like you form those habits so well by practicing them and doing them like daily, like literally daily, that it's almost just like second, like first nature, like you're just like doing it, like it's not even like, you don't have to think about it as much. That doesn't mean it still happens every time for me. It doesn't mean I still do those things every single time. It's just oftentimes I found through practicing that and working on that discipline and things like that, that, it does help make it easier to get those things done, even whenever like shit's hitting the fan up here. And so, personally though, like, that's the thing is like, you know, motivation is not what you're looking for. Like motivation is not what you should be relying on, even if you're like, if you're having a depressive episode or something like that, like motivation is not your friend. Like it's not. It is a false, like, tricky thing that is great to ride that wave whenever it's happening if you're already doing everything else that you should be doing discipline wise. But motivation, people get confused motivation and discipline is like the same thing. Like they confuse like, man, that person's so motivated, they're always doing things because look how motivated they are. Like they're constantly on top of their shit and doing things like, man, I want to be motivated like that. No, you do not. You do not want to be motivated like that. You want to be disciplined like that. Discipline is doing things whenever you don't feel like doing them, like even if it comes to a point. It depends on how like intense your depression or whatever mental health issue that you're dealing with like is like, and I get that it's a situation by situation basis, but you know you're not looking for motivation. That's the one key thing here I want to emphasize is like, this is not a game of motivation, it is a game of discipline. And you know having those skills that you've been practicing and making habits and things like that make that, having that discipline even when shit's hitting the fan a lot easier. It doesn't mean it's going to work every time. Like don't get me wrong, like there are times like it doesn't matter whatever I do to stay on top of my shit whenever things get messed up. Sometimes like it's one of those things where I have no control over it, and like I'm not doing anything that day kind of thing. And so that brings me to my next point is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, like something is better than nothing. Like, you know, maybe you don't have the willpower or the energy or the mental like capacity at that point in time to, even think about going for, that 5 mile run that you're planning on doing. Okay, go for a half-mile walk. Like go for a 5 minute walk. Like get out of the house, get out of like the environment that you're in right now at that time if you can, and do something because that's better than nothing. It may not be perfect, but it's not about perfection. It's about progress and it's about being consistent, even if it's only half as much or a tenth or a hundredth as much as what you were hoping to do that day. That's okay. Like that's something. You're still taking steps in the right direction. Maybe you're not going to have a workout. Maybe you can't go do, 10 sets of squats or something. That's fine. Like just go to the gym and jump rope. Like go and walk around like your complex. Go and do some, box squats or dumbbell squats or body weight squats or some like, half-ass like little shitty band workout at home. Like that's fine. That's better than nothing, right? So I like to try and think of it as like, like, and it's hard. It is hard sometimes to like, get out of your head whenever that shit's going on and think about these things. But practicing thinking about these things on your day on the day to day and things like that will help prepare you for situations whenever it's things are going badly. And so something is better than nothing. Keep that in mind. That is one thing that has really helped me. I may not be able to do everything perfectly that day, or I may not be able to do anything like intense, but I can do something, and something is better than nothing. The other thing that I was wanting to talk about too is just like, and I kind of mentioned this, like having a routine, like having a morning routine, like having something that you do every single fucking day, like, whether it's getting up like a half hour earlier than everybody else and, doing some stretches, like, writing out things that you're grateful for, meditating for like 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is, like, listening to something like inspirational or something that always like, gets you going, like having some coffee, like a little bit of caffeine sometimes can like help me, with what I've got going on up in there. You know, just kind of like to recalibrate a little bit in the mornings. And once you get started doing it, like, you know, it can help, you know, get you, you know, into a positive, like kind of like momentum and headspace. And that can sometimes help you get through the day. And so that's one thing that's another thing that you know, I do every single day. And I've noticed like whenever I had bad days or I knew or I felt like a bad day was going to come on, like, you know, like doing those things always helped at least lessen it to where it wasn't as intense or as bad. The other thing too is just honestly, like, you know, making like a small, easy to-do list of like, you know, even if it's just one thing on that list and you do that one thing, that's something that you can feel good about that you did, that you can like look at and like be like, okay, well, you know, today wasn't a total like loss. Like I was able to like get something done, even if it was just making your bed or like brushing your teeth or like, you know, cooking dinner or something like that. Like that's a win. And you know, the other thing too, like, you know, like, and so this is the other thing is I'm gonna say like a little bit of an analogy here in a sec, but like the other thing too that I already talked about is like you have to work on like not beating yourself up for like having this happen. Like it is not your fault that you have a chemical imbalance going on. Like it's not like, you know, it very likely is not. And the other thing too is like, you know, it's just something that's happening to you and like you're only gonna make things worse if you beat yourself up and talk shit about yourself and all that other stuff. It's just going to feed that cycle and it's going to make it last longer and it's going to make it worse and make it more intense. So you have to really try to like, you know, try and be like, have the presence of mind to like, you know, take a step back and be like, man, like this sucks that this is happening. But I know that like, if I'm just like, gonna like talk shit about myself, like I'm going to feel worse. So let's just, you know, accept it for what it is. And, you know, just deal with it as it's going on. And then the analogy that I want to talk about is, you know, for me personally, when it's going on and I'm having like a really hard time, you know, something that I have to like, I tell myself and you know, I keep in mind is that, you know, like this is just a storm, you know, going on. It's just a storm brewing up in here, hanging over my head and shit like that. But like every storm, it's gonna pass eventually. You know, it's gonna pass eventually. And like every time that, you know, I have something like that happen, and if you're practicing these things that I've talked about already and you're being mindful enough about some of these things, like every time that storm comes through, it's gonna fucking tear shit up. It's gonna break things down and you know you're gonna have and what you have to do is you're gonna have to pick up those pieces and rebuild it. And every time that you do that, every time that you get through, you know, that storm, one, if you've been practicing the things that I've been talking about, your like your house or your fitness journey or your life and what you've got going on in it prior to that storm that gets broken down and things like that, every time you practice that shit, it's going to get a little bit stronger. That storm, that house is going to, that foundation, that house, that fitness journey, like the skills that you're developing and things like that, like it's going to get a little bit stronger each time that you rebuild it because you've been here before. You've dealt with that storm before. And sometimes the storms are really intense, sometimes they're not. But every time you build it, you build that foundation up a little bit and you make it a little bit stronger each time from practicing these things and working on these things and being mindful of these things. Those storms might be a little bit less intense than the time before. Those storms might be a little less like, you know, like destructive because you prepared for it. And then the other fact of it, the other thing too, is just like every time like that you know rebuild and every time that that storm passes and you rebuild it, like it's not only going to take like not only is your infrastructure and your foundation, your fitness journey going to be stronger each time, but also you're like gonna get a lot better at rebuilding it a lot quicker. Like it's one of those things that it's like you don't get set back to like square one every time it happens. Like don't think of it like that. Think of it if you're practicing these things and you're doing these things, maybe you got set back to square two or square three or square four. But each time that you rebuild, maybe it's even maybe if you even you know instead of getting set back to square one, you're set back to square 1.1. That's still better than square one. And so, you know, like building, like doing these things and like preparing for them and all this stuff that I've talked about, that's how I deal with it. And that's how I view it. It's just like, it's just a bad storm and it's going to pass. And if you're practicing these things, you're building a stronger, solid foundation. So the storm's not going to fuck it up as badly as the last time. And you're going to rebuild and you're going to get it through it. And, you know, one or two or three, or maybe even a week of like, you know, horrible days isn't going to, you know, overthrow or outweigh the other, 355 plus days that you've been busting your ass and working on your plan and things like that. And so that's my life for today, guys. I hope that that helps. I hope that that was useful. I hope that, those of you that deal with the shit that I deal with can relate to that. I hope that this helps. I hope that this kind of like, lets you see how I see it and how I deal with it and how, and I'm not gonna lie, like, sometimes it won't work. Sometimes the storm is too intense and it puts you down and you gotta like, just buckle up and like wait for it to pass. And then you can start doing that rebuilding process that I talked about. And it's okay. That's fine. Like I said, like, lose the battle so that way you can, fight another day and win the war. And so, that's my life for today. Pretty intense, pretty, I don't know, fun stuff, I guess. Not really, but it's just something that people deal with, and it's part of life. And I hope that this helps, at least, even if this only helps one person, like that's a win. So that's my life for today. Hope you guys have an amazing Thursday. If you watch this at a later time, hit me with that hashtag replay. Give this video a like. Let me know that you saw it. What was your number one takeaway from this live? Do you guys suffer from, mental illness or depression or anxiety or whatever it may be that causes you to become, like unable to do your stuff? Like, does this help? Does this make sense? Like, let me know. Like, seriously, let me know. Reach out to me if, you are dealing with stuff like this and you need some like help or whatever. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but, I work on my mindset a lot and I feel like I've got a pretty decent system down for me personally. And like I said, it's not one size fit all, but it definitely helps some of the clients that I have that have dealt with this in the past. So that's my life for today. Have a good one, everybody. Peace, Facebook.